Lady Sylviana Moonwhisper stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched her world die. The crystal ships moved like living nightmares across the sky of Lumenspire, turning everything they touched into silent glass. Her homeworld had been alive for thousands of years with singing trees and glowing rivers, but now it was becoming a tomb of beautiful crystal formations that would never sing again. She was 847 years old and had seen many battles, but nothing like this. The Zephyrian Empire had come from beyond the known galaxy 6 months ago with ships that seemed to be made of living crystal. They did not want to rule or trade or negotiate. They only wanted to convert everything into more crystal, more of themselves. The Elvish fleet had fought bravely, but their magic meant nothing against these creatures. Sylviana had watched her best warriors try to cast spells of destruction and protection, only to see the crystal ships absorb the energy and grow stronger. The ancient songs of power that had protected her people for millennia were useless against an enemy that fed on magical energy itself. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood beside her on the bridge, representing the human observers that the Galactic Coalition had reluctantly allowed to witness the war. Maya was young by Elvish standards, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and serious brown eyes that missed nothing. She had been studying the Zephyrian attacks for weeks, taking notes and asking questions that sometimes surprised Sylviana with their insight. The communication panel crackled with desperate voices from across the galaxy. Admiral Zarathis the Scaled was coordinating the retreat from the Draconian Defense Corps command ship, her reptilian voice tight with controlled fear. 12 worlds remained free out of the hundreds that had been in the coalition just 6 months ago. Everyone knew that Haven's Gate would be the last stand, and everyone knew it would not be enough. Dr. Lisa Chang worked frantically at her science station, trying to find some weakness in the Zephyrian biology that could be exploited. She had been studying the enemy for months, but the crystal beings seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. Every theory she developed led to the same conclusion. Conventional weapons and magical attacks simply could not harm creatures that could phase in and out of reality at will. The last evacuation ships lifted off from Lumenspire's surface as Sylviana gave the order to abandon her homeworld. Thousands of her people crowded into cargo holds and passenger compartments, carrying what little they could save from a civilization that had lasted for 50,000 years. Children who had never known fear clung to their parents as the ships accelerated away from the dying world. Sylviana felt each death like a knife in her heart. The Zephyrian harvesters were converting the planet's core now, turning the very foundation of the world into crystal matrix. Soon there would be nothing left but a beautiful, lifeless sphere that would join the growing empire of the Crystal Throne. Maya Rodriguez touched Sylviana's arm gently. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The human's voice was full of genuine sadness, even though this was not her world or her people dying below them. "Your species has not been touched by this war," Sylviana replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Earth is too far away and too primitive for the Zephyrians to notice. Perhaps that is wisdom." Maya was quiet for a moment, watching the crystal formations spread across the continents below. "Maybe being primitive isn't always a weakness," she said finally. Commander Kate Morgan's voice came over the communication system from the human observation ship that followed the Elvish fleet. She had been arguing with Earth Command for hours, requesting permission to offer military assistance. Earth's government had repeatedly refused, stating that humanity's small fleet could not make a difference against an enemy that had defeated the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Sylviana understood their logic, but part of her wondered what the humans might be able to do. Their technology was crude compared to Elvish magic or draconian energy weapons, but it was also completely different. Maya had mentioned that human weapons relied on simple kinetic force and chemical explosives rather than energy manipulation. Perhaps that difference might matter somehow. The retreat to Haven's Gate took 3 days of running battles through hyperspace. The Zephyrian pursuit ships were relentless, following the fleeing coalition forces and converting any ship that fell behind. Sylviana lost 2 more vessels from her fleet when their engines failed, and they could not keep up with the evacuation convoy. Dr. Chang spent those 3 days analyzing every piece of data they had collected about the Zephyrian ships. Her findings were disturbing. The crystal beings did not just convert matter into crystal formations. They also absorbed the life force and consciousness of every living thing they touched. The billions of beings that had died in the conquest were not truly dead, but trapped forever within the crystal matrix, aware but unable to act or speak or die. When the fleet finally reached Haven's Gate, Sylviana saw the full scope of their defeat. The fortress system that had once been the Coalition's greatest stronghold was crowded with refugee ships from dozens of worlds. Millions of beings from 100 different species huddled together in makeshift camps on the planets and space stations, all waiting for the inevitable final attack. Admiral Zarathis called an emergency meeting of all surviving military commanders. The reptilian officer's scaled face showed the exhaustion they all felt as she explained the situation. Intelligence reports indicated that the main Zephyrian fleet would arrive within days. Their forces outnumbered the remaining Coalition ships by more than 10 to 1. "We have perhaps a week before the final assault begins," Zarathis said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Our defensive preparations are complete, but we all know they will not be sufficient. The outcome is clear. We will fight and we will die, but we will make them pay for every world they have taken." Sylviana looked around the table at the faces of officers who had become friends over months of desperate fighting. They were brave and skilled and completely doomed. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered civilizations far more advanced than any of theirs. Magic had failed. Energy weapons had failed. Even the ancient technologies of the old ones had failed. Maya Rodriguez sat in the corner of the meeting room, officially just an observer but clearly thinking hard about everything she heard. Sylviana noticed that the human woman was taking detailed notes and asking Dr. Chang quiet questions about Zephyrian phasing abilities. As the meeting ended and the commanders dispersed to prepare their final defenses, Maya approached Sylviana privately. "What if I told you that my people might be able to help?" she asked quietly. Sylviana almost laughed, but stopped herself when she saw the serious expression on Maya's face. "Your government has already refused to become involved. Earth's fleet is small and your weapons are primitive compared to what we have already tried. Sometimes primitive is exactly what you need," Maya said. "My commanding officer is preparing a message to Earth right now. We think the Coalition Council should formally request human assistance." Sylviana stared at the young human woman who seemed to believe that her people could succeed where the greatest powers in the galaxy had failed. It was probably foolish hope, but hope was all they had left. Perhaps it was time to find out what Earth's bravest could really do. Admiral Nicole Barnes received the emergency transmission from Maya Rodriguez while she was reviewing defensive plans for Earth's outer colonies. The message was brief but shocking. The Galactic Coalition was formally requesting military assistance from humanity to fight an enemy that had conquered 90% of known space in 6 months. Nicole had been expecting something like this ever since the first reports of the Zephyrian invasion reached Earth. She was a practical woman who had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Force, rising through the ranks by making hard decisions and preparing for impossible situations. While the politicians had debated whether to get involved in an alien war, Nicole had been quietly mobilizing humanity's entire interstellar fleet. The council chamber on Haven's Gate was crowded with desperate leaders when Sylviana formally presented the Human Alliance proposal. Admiral Zarathis spoke first, her reptilian features showing skepticism. "With respect to our human observers, their fleet numbers only 2,000 ships. We have already lost 10 times that number fighting the Zephyrians." Dr. Rebecca Stone stood to address the council, her blonde hair pulled back severely and her blue eyes intense with conviction. She had been studying Zephyrian technology for months through the data Maya had transmitted to Earth. "Numbers aren't everything," she said calmly. "We believe the Zephyrians have a fundamental weakness that no one has exploited yet." Sylviana leaned forward in her chair. "What weakness could you possibly have found that our greatest scientists and mages have missed?" Rebecca activated a holographic display that showed the quantum structure of Zephyrian crystal ships. The enemy exists in a state of quantum superposition, allowing them to phase in and out of normal space-time. This makes them nearly invulnerable to energy weapons and magical attacks because they can simply shift into a different dimensional phase when threatened. The council members murmured among themselves, clearly not understanding how this information helped their situation. Rebecca continued with growing confidence. But there's something unique about human technology. Our weapons systems operate on purely mechanical principles that don't rely on energy manipulation or dimensional effects. Kinetic rounds, chemical explosives, and electromagnetic pulses might be invisible to Zephyrian defenses simply because they exist entirely in normal space-time. Dr. Lisa Chang looked intrigued despite her exhaustion. You're suggesting that primitive technology might be more effective than advanced systems? Exactly, Rebecca replied. The Zephyrians have never encountered an enemy that fights with crude physical force instead of sophisticated energy manipulation. They may not even be able to detect incoming projectiles that don't use exotic physics. Admiral Zarathis remained skeptical. Even if human weapons can damage Zephyrian ships, your fleet is still vastly outnumbered. 2,000 ships cannot defeat an empire. Maya Rodriguez stepped forward to stand beside Rebecca. Admiral Barnes isn't sending 2,000 ships, she said quietly. She's sending 2,000 ships crewed entirely by volunteers who know they're probably going to die. Every human vessel that can reach Haven's Gate will be here within 72 hours. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Commander Kate Morgan's voice came over the communications system, confirming Maya's statement. Earth Defense Command has authorized Operation Last Stand. Every available ship, every trained crew member, and every experimental weapons system we've developed is being deployed to Haven's Gate immediately. Silviana felt something she had not experienced in months. Hope. The idea was insane and probably suicidal, but the humans seemed genuinely convinced they could make a difference. More importantly, they were willing to risk everything to help people they barely knew fight an enemy that posed no direct threat to Earth. The first human ships began arriving 18 hours later. Lieutenant Amy Foster brought her experimental stealth squadron through the system's outer perimeter, their small fighters barely visible even to Coalition sensors. Amy was a test pilot who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments available, and her squadron had been testing prototype ships designed to operate in hostile space for months. Silviana watched the human vessels dock with Coalition facilities, and was struck by how different they were from every other ship she had ever seen. Where Elvish vessels were elegant and flowing, and Draconian ships were sleek and powerful, human ships looked like flying fortresses. They were heavily armored, bristling with weapons, and powered by fusion reactors that seemed barely contained within their hulls. Specialist Megan Walsh established communications between the human fleet and Coalition command, her easy smile and patient manner helping to bridge the gap between very different military cultures. She had spent years studying alien languages and customs, making her invaluable for coordinating the unprecedented alliance. Dr. Rebecca Stone worked with Dr. Lisa Chang to analyze the technical specifications of human weapons systems. They discovered that electromagnetic pulse weapons, which humans had developed for disabling enemy electronics, had never been tested against crystalline structures that existed in quantum superposition. The theoretical possibilities were encouraging but untested. The real test came when Amy Foster's stealth squadron encountered a Zephyrian scout ship near the system's edge. Amy led her fighters in a standard attack pattern, using kinetic projectiles instead of energy weapons. To everyone's amazement, the simple metal rounds punched straight through the Zephyrian vessel's phasing defenses and shattered its crystal matrix. The scout ship's destruction sent shockwaves through both fleets. For the first time since the war began, someone had actually hurt a Zephyrian vessel. Amy's excited voice came over the communication channels as her squadron regrouped. Direct hit! The target is down. Whatever these things are, they can't phase. Away from good old-fashioned bullets. Admiral Barnes arrived with the main human fleet 2 days later, bringing nearly 2,000 ships of every size and configuration. The fleet included everything from massive battleships armed with railguns to small frigates carrying experimental weapons systems. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who had left families and careers behind to fight in an alien war. Silviana met with Admiral Barnes privately to discuss strategy and was impressed by the human officer's direct approach to problem-solving. Nicole was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and steady hands, someone who had clearly seen combat before and understood the realities of warfare. "My people are brave, but we're not suicidal," Nicole explained as they reviewed tactical displays. We need to hit the Zephyrians hard and fast before they can adapt to our weapons. Once they understand how kinetic attacks work, they'll find ways to defend against them. The combined human and coalition forces began intensive training exercises, learning to coordinate their very different fighting styles. Elvish void-walking magic could transport human strike teams directly onto enemy ships, while human weapons could provide the firepower needed to actually damage Zephyrian structures. Engineer Claire Johnson worked around the clock to modify human weapons systems for use by coalition forces. Her hybrid designs combined human kinetic technology with elvish enhancement magic and draconian power systems, creating weapons that were more effective than any single species could produce alone. Tuturbi. Zephyrian response came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive crystal fleet approaching Haven's Gate, led by ships larger than anything the Coalition had seen before. The Crystal Throne was sending her most powerful servants to crush the last center of resistance. Maya. Rodriguez stood with Silviana on the bridge of the Elvish flagship as the enemy fleet approached. The human woman's expression was calm despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "My people have a saying," Maya said quietly. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Silviana smiled despite their desperate situation. She was beginning to understand that humans possessed something that all their advanced technology and ancient magic had not prepared the galaxy for: the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when victory seemed impossible. The first battle would begin within hours, and for the first time since the war started, the outcome was not completely clear. Earth's bravest had arrived, and they intended to prove that sometimes the most primitive approach was exactly what the situation required. The first battle at Haven's Gate lasted 14 hours and changed everything. Amy Foster led her stealth squadron in the opening attack, using hit-and-run tactics that no Zephyrian commander had ever encountered. Her fighters would appear from nowhere, deliver devastating kinetic strikes, then disappear before the crystal ships could respond. Silviana watched from her command bridge as human weapons tore through Zephyrian defenses that had seemed impenetrable for months. The sight of crystal ships actually exploding instead of simply absorbing damage sent waves of excitement through the Coalition fleet. For the first time since the war began, they were winning. But victory came at a terrible price. The Zephyrians adapted quickly to the new threat, focusing their attacks on human ships with devastating efficiency. Admiral Barnes lost 400 vessels in the first engagement, nearly 20% of her entire fleet. The humans fought with desperate courage, but they were still facing an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. Commander Rachel Evans established a new command center that coordinated human and elvish forces in real time. She was a strategic genius who had studied every major battle in human history, and she understood how to use each species' strengths to maximum advantage. Under her direction, elvish void-walking magic transported human assault teams directly onto Zephyrian ships, while human firepower provided the destruction needed to actually eliminate the targets. Dr. Ashley Kim made the breakthrough that turned the tide of the war. Working with captured Zephyrian crystal fragments, she discovered that their quantum structure became unstable when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies. More importantly, human fusion reactors naturally produced those exact frequencies. As a byproduct of their operation, every human ship is broadcasting a signal that disrupts Zephyrian phasing abilities, Ashley explained to the combined command staff. They can't maintain quantum superposition when they're close to our vessels. That's why our kinetic weapons are so effective. Captain Samantha Lee used this information to plan the first successful ground assault on a Zephyrian-controlled world. Her Marines wore powered armor that incorporated Ashley's frequency generators, allowing them to fight crystal creatures on equal terms. The assault on Kepler Prime was brutal but successful, marking the first time anyone had retaken a world from the Zephyrian Empire. Silviana found herself working closely with Maya Rodriguez as their species learned to fight together. The partnership was unlike anything in her long life. Where elves relied on ancient wisdom and careful planning, humans improvised solutions with startling creativity. Maya's insights into human psychology helped Silviana understand why her new allies were so effective. "We don't fight to preserve ourselves," Maya explained during a brief rest between battles. "We fight to protect others, even when we don't know them." Every human ship out there is crewed by people who left their families behind to help strangers in a war that isn't really ours. The friendship between the two women deepened as they shared the burden of command. Silviana began to appreciate human directness and determination, while Maya gained respect for elvish wisdom and magical precision. They made an effective team, combining elvish strategic thinking with human tactical flexibility. Engineer Claire Johnson revolutionized coalition warfare by creating hybrid weapons that no one had thought possible. Her spell-guided missiles used elvish enchantments to track targets, while human warheads provided the actual destruction. Her phase disruption cannons combined human electromagnetic technology with elvish dimensional magic to tear holes in Zephyrian defenses. The success at Kepler Prime led to more ambitious operations. Captain Lee's Marines fought alongside elvish voidwalkers in battles across a dozen worlds, carving through crystal formations that had seemed permanent just weeks before. The sight of organic life returning to crystallized planets gave hope to millions of refugees who had thought their homes were lost forever. Dr. Ashley Kim's research revealed more disturbing truths about Zephyrian technology. The crystal beings were not just converting matter into crystal formations, they were preserving the consciousness of every living thing they absorbed. Billions of minds were trapped within the crystal matrix, aware but helpless to act or communicate. They're not evil, Ashley told the command staff during a briefing. They're trying to preserve life the only way they know how. But preservation without freedom isn't really life at all. The revelation changed how coalition forces approached captured Zephyrians. Instead of simply destroying crystal formations, they began using Ashley's frequency generators to disrupt the quantum matrix and free the trapped consciousnesses. The process was dangerous and often unsuccessful, but it offered hope for eventual liberation of the billions who had been absorbed. Amy Foster's pilots became legends throughout coalition space as they pioneered new fighting techniques that maximized human advantages. Her squadron learned to coordinate with elvish voidwalkers, using magical transportation to appear behind enemy formations before delivering kinetic strikes. The combination of elvish mobility and human firepower proved devastatingly effective. The Zephyrian response was swift and terrible. Crystal prophets began appearing on the battlefield, massive entities that could corrupt living beings into crystalline servants. Several coalition commanders were lost to this new threat before Dr. Kim developed countermeasures based on human immune system responses. Silviana faced her greatest personal challenge when reports arrived that her sister Lunara had been captured during a failed rescue mission. The thought of her beloved sister trapped within Crystal Matrix, aware but unable to act, nearly broke Silviana's resolve. Maya provided crucial emotional support, helping the ancient elf find strength to continue fighting. Your sister wouldn't want you to give up, Maya said gently. She'd want you to keep fighting until every trapped consciousness can be freed. That's what this war is really about now. Commander Rachel Evans planned Operation Shattered Mirror, the largest offensive in coalition history. The plan called for simultaneous strikes on 17 Zephyrian worlds, designed to overwhelm their defenses and prevent them from adapting to human tactics. The operation required perfect coordination between human technology, elvish magic, and the remaining draconian fleet. The preparation for Shattered Mirror took weeks of intensive planning and training. Human pilots learned to work with elvish navigators who could guide them through dimensional shortcuts. Elvish mages practiced coordinating their spells with human weapons systems. Even the proud draconian officers began to appreciate the value of human adaptability and determination. Dr. Angela Roberts worked tirelessly to develop medical countermeasures against Zephyrian corruption, using human immune systems as a template for treatments that could work on multiple species. Her field hospitals became centers of hope, where beings thought lost forever were slowly freed from crystal matrix influence. As Operation Shattered Mirror launched, Silviana stood with Maya on the bridge of their flagship and watched the largest fleet action in galactic history unfold. Human ships led the assault while elvish vessels provided magical support and draconian forces delivered precision strikes against key targets. The operation succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. 17 worlds were liberated simultaneously, dealing massive damage to Zephyrian infrastructure and freeing millions of trapped consciousnesses. For the first time since the war began, the Zephyrian Empire was actually retreating instead of simply regrouping. But victory celebrations were brief. Intelligence gathered during the operation revealed that the Crystal Throne possessed a final weapon of unimaginable power. Hidden somewhere in a pocket dimension, the Zephyrian Empress had constructed a device capable of converting entire star systems into crystalline matrices within hours. Commander Linda Hayes brought her ship back from deep reconnaissance with disturbing news. The weapon was nearly complete and would be activated soon. If successful, it could end all organic life in the galaxy within days. Maya Rodriguez studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. "We've been winning battles, but the war is about to change completely. If they activate that weapon, nothing we've accomplished will matter." Silviana felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her. They had come so far and sacrificed so much, but now faced a threat that made all their previous victories meaningless. The only way to stop the ultimate weapon would require entering the Crystal Throne's hidden dimension, and no one knew if that was even possible. As coalition forces regrouped after their greatest victory, everyone understood that the real test was still ahead. The outcome had seemed clear until Earth's bravest arrived, but now they faced challenges that would test everything they had learned about courage, sacrifice, and the true meaning of victory. The war entered its darkest phase as both sides adapted to new realities that no one had anticipated. The Zephyrian Empire began modifying their tactics to account for human capabilities, developing new crystal formations that could resist electromagnetic disruption. Worse, they unleashed their most terrifying weapon yet, the ability to corrupt living beings into crystalline servants who retained their memories and skills but served only the Crystal Throne. General Diana Price arrived at Haven's Gate with reinforcements from Earth's deepest military reserves, bringing experimental weapons and desperate volunteers who knew they were joining a war that grew more dangerous every day. Diana was a veteran of Earth's colonial conflicts, a woman who understood that sometimes victory required sacrifices that no one wanted to make. Silviana watched helplessly as reports came in of coalition commanders being captured and converted during what should have been routine operations. The sight of respected officers fighting against their former allies was devastating for morale throughout the fleet. Even worse was the knowledge that somewhere inside those crystal-corrupted bodies, the original consciousness remained aware but powerless to resist. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Turner volunteered for the most dangerous mission anyone had yet attempted, infiltrating Zephyrian space to gather intelligence on the Crystal Throne's ultimate weapon. Beth was a Special Forces operative who had survived impossible odds on a dozen worlds, but even she understood that this assignment was likely a one-way trip. Maya Rodriguez found herself struggling with the weight of command as human casualties mounted with each engagement. Every day brought news of ships lost and crews sacrificed for small tactical gains. The price of their success was becoming almost unbearable, especially when she received personal messages from families asking about loved ones who would never return home. Dr. Angela Roberts established field hospitals throughout coalition space, where she worked to develop countermeasures against Zephyrian corruption. Her research used human immune responses as a template, but the process of freeing corrupted beings was dangerous and often fatal. For every consciousness she successfully restored, 3 more were lost to the crystal matrix forever. The breakthrough came when Beth Turner's infiltration team successfully penetrated the outer defenses of Zephyrian space. Working with elvish shadow mages and human stealth technology, they managed to gather detailed intelligence about the Crystal Throne's hidden dimension. The information they brought back was both encouraging and terrifying. Commander Linda Hayes received Turner's data aboard her advanced reconnaissance ship and immediately understood the implications. The Crystal Throne's ultimate weapon was indeed capable of converting entire star systems, but it required the Empress to maintain personal control over the quantum matrix. More importantly, the weapon's activation would leave the Crystal Throne vulnerable for a brief period while she channeled the necessary energy. "There's a window of maybe 10 minutes where she can't defend herself," Linda explained to the combined command staff. "But reaching her requires someone to create a dimensional bridge by merging with Zephyrian technology. The process would certainly be fatal and might result in corruption." Silviana felt her heart sink as she realized what this meant. They could stop the ultimate weapon, but only by asking someone to sacrifice their life and possibly their soul. The room fell silent as every officer contemplated the impossible choice they faced. Maya Rodriguez spoke first, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. We need volunteers. This can't be an order because no one has the right to condemn someone else to that fate. But if we don't act, billions will die when the weapon activates. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of officers from every species stepped forward, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Amy Foster volunteered to pilot the mission ship, while Dr. Rebecca Stone offered to design the dimensional bridge technology. Even Dr. Ashley Kim volunteered to undergo the merging process herself. General Price established a special task force to plan what everyone understood would be the final battle of the war. The operation required unprecedented coordination between human engineering, elvish magic, and captured Zephyrian technology. Every component had to work perfectly, or the mission would fail, and the galaxy would fall. Silviana faced her most personal crisis when new intelligence revealed that her sister Lunara was not just captured, but had been converted into one of the Crystal Throne's most powerful servants. The reports described Lunara leading Zephyrian forces with tactical brilliance that came from her elvish training, but in service to an enemy that had destroyed everything they both loved. I have to face her, Silviana told Maya during one of their private meetings. If we succeed in reaching the Crystal Throne, Lunara will be there defending her. I might have to destroy my own sister to save the galaxy. Maya's friendship became Silviana's anchor during the darkest moments of preparation. The human woman understood loss in ways that helped the ancient elf process emotions she had never experienced before. Together, they found strength to continue, planning an operation that would cost them everything they cared about. Dr. Jennifer Parker arrived from Earth with the most advanced quantum technology humanity had ever developed. Her dimensional generators could theoretically create a stable bridge to the Crystal Throne's hidden realm, but the power requirements were enormous. The generators would need to be powered by the life force of the person creating the bridge. Captain Kelly Martinez volunteered to pilot the mission ship through the dimensional bridge, knowing that the journey would take her into a realm where the laws of physics operated differently. Kelly was a test pilot who had pushed experimental technology beyond all safe limits, but this mission would test the boundaries of what was possible. The final preparations took weeks of intensive work, as scientists and engineers from multiple species collaborated on technology that should have been impossible. Human quantum generators were integrated with elvish dimensional magic, while Zephyrian crystal samples provided the exotic matter needed to anchor the bridge in both dimensions. Admiral Susan Clark took command of the final fleet action, coordinating the largest military operation in galactic history. Every surviving coalition ship would participate in the assault, creating a diversion massive enough to hide the real mission from Zephyrian sensors. The plan required perfect timing and absolute courage from thousands of beings who knew they were fighting their last battle. Beth Turner's final intelligence report arrived just as the fleet prepared to depart. Her infiltration team had discovered that the Crystal Throne was not just a weapon, but also a prison. The Zephyrian Empress was trapped within her own creation, unable to die, but also unable to truly live. The ultimate weapon was her attempt to preserve consciousness in the only way she understood, even if it meant destroying free will itself. She's not evil, Beth reported from deep behind enemy lines. She's desperate and afraid and completely alone. The entire Zephyrian Empire is her attempt to create companions who can never leave her or die or change. But preservation without freedom isn't life. This revelation changed everything about how they approached the final mission. Instead of simply destroying the Crystal Throne, they now had the possibility of offering something the Empress had sought for millennia: genuine companionship and the acceptance of mortality as part of what made life meaningful. Maya Rodriguez stood with Silviana as the fleet prepared for its final jump to Zephyrian space. Both women understood that they were about to witness either the salvation or destruction of everything they had fought to protect. The outcome was no longer clear because they were no longer fighting just to win, but to offer redemption to an enemy who had forgotten what it meant to truly live. As the ships entered hyperspace for the last time, everyone aboard understood that they were carrying more than weapons and technology. They carried the hopes and dreams of countless species, the memory of worlds that had been lost, and the determination to prove that life was worth preserving only when it remained free. to choose its own destiny. The final battle began when Admiral Susan Clark's fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian home territory. The sight that greeted them defied imagination. Thousands of crystal ships arranged in perfect geometric formations around a pulsing dimensional rift that led to the Crystal Throne's hidden realm. The enemy had been expecting them and prepared the largest military force anyone had ever seen. Colonel Patricia Grant led the diversionary assault with desperate courage. Knowing that her forces faced impossible odds, her ships fought with the fury of the condemned, drawing Zephyrian attention away from the real mission, while Captain Kelly Martinez prepared her specially modified vessel for the journey into another dimension. Dr. Jennifer Parker made final adjustments to the quantum generators that would power the dimensional bridge. Her calculations showed that the process would require more energy than any single person could provide, but Silviana and Maya had developed a solution that neither woman wanted to discuss. Instead of one person sacrificing themselves, they would share the burden using a combination of elvish life magic and human determination. The breakthrough came when Dr. Parker realized that the dimensional bridge could be powered by multiple volunteers working together, spreading the fatal energy drain across several people instead of killing one person instantly. It was still a death sentence, but it offered the possibility that some of the volunteers might survive long enough to complete the mission. Kelly Martinez piloted the mission ship Defiant Dawn toward the dimensional rift, while Patricia Grant's forces fought the largest space battle in galactic history. The ship represented the best of both human engineering and elvish craftsmanship, designed specifically to survive in a realm where normal physics might not apply. Amy Foster led her fighter squadron in the most dangerous escort mission ever attempted, using hit-and-run tactics to clear a path through Zephyrian defenses. Her pilots flew with reckless courage, knowing that every enemy ship they destroyed might give the mission a slightly better chance of success. The dimensional transition was unlike anything Kelly had experienced. One moment she was flying through normal space, and the next she found herself in a realm where crystal formations stretched to infinity in all directions. The laws of physics operated differently here, and only the ship's specially designed systems kept her alive in an environment that would have been instantly fatal to normal technology. Silviana and Maya worked together to maintain the dimensional bridge from the Coalition side, channeling their combined life force through Dr. Parker's quantum generators. The process was agonizing, but they held on, knowing that Kelly's success depended on keeping the bridge stable long enough for her to reach the Crystal Throne. The Crystal Throne itself was beyond anything Kelly had imagined. It existed at the center of a vast crystalline palace that seemed to extend through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The structure was beautiful and terrible, a monument to the desperate loneliness of a being who had forgotten what it meant to truly live. Kelly's first encounter with the Zephyrian Empress revealed the tragic truth behind the entire war. The Crystal Throne was not occupied by a conqueror or destroyer, but by the crystallized remains of an ancient being who had lost everything she loved to the passage of time. The Empress had spent millennia trying to preserve consciousness and life, but her methods had turned preservation into a prison. "I remember what it was like to die," the Empress whispered through crystal formations that resonated with overwhelming sadness. "I remember the fear and the pain and the loneliness. I cannot let others experience that. I will preserve them forever, where they will never know loss or change or death." Kelly found herself face to face with an enemy who was driven, not by hatred, but by love that had become twisted by isolation and despair. The ultimate weapon was not an instrument of destruction, but a desperate attempt to save every living thing by removing their ability to choose their own fate. Dr. Parker's quantum bomb was designed to destroy the Crystal Throne's dimensional matrix, but Kelly realized that destruction would only create another tragedy. Instead, she began implementing the alternative plan that Silviana and Maya had developed, offering the Empress something she had not experienced in millennia. "You don't have to be alone," Kelly said, her voice carrying genuine compassion across the dimensional barrier. "There are billions of beings in the galaxy who would be your friends if you gave them the choice. Preservation without freedom isn't love, it's fear." The offer of genuine companionship and acceptance of mortality as part of life struck the Empress with unexpected force. For the first time in thousands of years, She considered the possibility that death might not be the ultimate enemy, but rather the thing that gave meaning to life by making every moment precious. Back in normal space, Sylviana felt the dimensional bridge beginning to collapse as her life force drained away. Maya grabbed her hand, sharing the burden and buying Kelly a few more precious minutes to complete her mission. Both women understood that they might not survive, but they also knew that their sacrifice would mean nothing if Kelly failed. The battle raged around them as Patricia Grant's forces fought with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. Amy Foster's squadron had been reduced to a handful of fighters, but they continued attacking Zephyrian positions with the fury of the condemned. Every moment they brought Kelly closer to completing her impossible mission. The transformation began when the Empress made her choice. Instead of activating the ultimate weapon, she began dismantling the crystal matrix that had preserved billions of consciousnesses for so long. The process was dangerous and chaotic, but it offered the possibility of true freedom for everyone who had been trapped. Kelly watched in amazement as crystal formations throughout the dimensional realm began dissolving, releasing streams of consciousness that had been imprisoned for months or years or centuries. The freed beings were disoriented and weak, but they were alive and aware and free to make their own choices again. The dimensional bridge held just long enough for Kelly to guide the first wave of freed consciousnesses back to normal space. Dr. Parker's generators finally failed as Sylviana and Maya collapsed from exhaustion, but they had accomplished their mission. The Crystal Throne's ultimate weapon would never threaten the galaxy again. The Empress emerged from her crystalline prison as the Matrix collapsed around her. She was ancient and frail and completely mortal, but for the first time in millennia, she was truly alive. Kelly helped her through the collapsing dimensional rift just as the Defiant Dawn returned to normal space. The aftermath of the battle was bittersweet. The Zephyrian Empire surrendered when their Empress chose freedom over preservation, but the cost had been enormous. Thousands of coalition ships were destroyed, and millions of beings had died in the final assault. Patricia Grant was among the casualties, dying when her flagship rammed a Zephyrian superweapon to prevent it from destroying the rescue ships. Sylviana and Maya survived their ordeal, but both women were forever changed by the experience of sharing life force across species boundaries. Their friendship had become something deeper than either had thought possible, a bond that transcended the differences between their peoples. 3 years later, former Zephyrian worlds bloomed with new life, as crystal cities were transformed into gardens where multiple species worked together to build a better future. The Empress, now calling herself Elena, served as an ambassador for reconciliation, helping to heal the wounds left by her empire's desperate attempt to preserve life through force. Admiral Maya Rodriguez commanded the new coalition fleet from her flagship, leading exploration missions to regions of space that had been closed off for centuries. Her partnership with Ambassador Sylviana had become the model for cooperation between species that had once seemed incompatible. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the outcome seems clear only because everyone is thinking the same way. It took Earth's bravest, women who refused to accept defeat and who built bridges instead of walls, to remind the universe that the most powerful force in existence was not magic or technology, but hope, combined with the determination to never give up. The war was over, but the work of building a better galaxy had just begun. Humanity's greatest contribution had not been their weapons or their courage, though both had been crucial. Their real gift was the reminder that every being deserved the freedom to choose their own destiny, even when that choice included the possibility of loss and pain and death. Elena often stood in the gardens that had once been crystal formations, watching children of a dozen species play together without fear or prejudice. She had learned that true preservation meant protecting not just life itself, but the freedom that made life worth living. The outcome had indeed been clear until Earth's bravest arrived and showed everyone that there were always other possibilities for those brave enough to imagine them.